They start discussing the legend as more of a joke at first, but then the woods get strangely dark and still. Almost too still. A dark and lonesome country road outside the town of Bel Air, Michigan. It's a cloudy Saturday night in mid-October, the beginning of peak foliage season, but also rumored to be the height of Dogman sightings according to local lore. Enter our unsuspecting couple, John and Mary, in their blue Chevy Cruze. Music playing, windows down, enjoying the ride. Until up ahead, a lone figure appears staggering out of the brush. "What the hell?" says John, slamming on the brakes. But it's too late. A bone-chilling howl pierces the air as the creature lunges at the vehicle, rocking it with brutal force. John slams the car into reverse just in time. The Dogman's claws scrape against the metal of the passenger door with a bone-chilling shriek, but fail to penetrate. Mary screams and clutches John's arm in terror as the car fishtails wildly. He fights to regain control as their would-be attacker shrinks rapidly in the rearview mirror, letting out an echoing howl of rage and frustration. "Oh my God, what was that?" Mary cries hysterically. But John has no answers, merely floors the gas to put as much distance as possible between them and that thing lurking in the dark. Our couple rattles down the empty road at breakneck speed, peering frantically into the shadows, half expecting the mysterious creature to emerge, chasing after them at any second with another nightmarish howl. The tension and suspense is high as they flee into the unknown night. What challenges and scares will lie ahead? I say we play with the idea of the Dogman being an almost supernatural force of nature, as intelligent as it is savage. It may let them escape for now, only to continue toying with them from the shadows. Adrenaline courses through John and Mary as they speed down the lonely road, both peering fearfully into the darkness. After several miles, John begins to relax his death grip on the steering wheel. "I think we lost it," he says, breathing heavily. But then, up ahead, they spot a large fallen tree blocking the entire road. John slams on the brakes, but it's too late. They collide with the trunk with a jarring crunch. Both sit stunned as the engine stalls. In the sudden silence, a new sound reaches them, an unearthly howl in the distance, closer now than before. "It's coming!" Mary whispers, terrified. John springs into action despite his own panic. He throws open the door to assess the damage by the light of the moon. The front end is smashed in. "We'll have to go on foot," he tells Mary. But as they start to get out, a dark shape detaches from the trees across the road. It lets out a low, threatening growl that chills them to the bone. They're trapped. On one side, a fallen tree. On the other, the terrible Dogman silhouetted against the woods as it begins to stalk slowly towards its prey. The Dogman prowls ever closer, a nightmarish amalgamation of man and beast. John acts fast, grabbing a tire iron from the back. "When I say run, book it into the woods that way," he whispers to Mary, pointing. "I'll try to distract it." She nods shakily, too afraid to protest. The seconds drag like hours as the monster closes in. Finally, when it's nearly upon them, John screams a battle cry and leaps from the car, swinging wildly. The Dogman lets out an enraged howl, momentarily taken aback. "Now, Mary, run!" John yells. She bolts into the trees as the creature lunges at John. He narrowly dodges snapping jaws, lashing out with the iron. It connects with a sickening crunch, buying him time to flee as well. The two plunge blindly into the dense forest, the monster's crashes and howls growing ever closer behind. Branches tear at their clothes and skin in the darkness. Finally, up ahead, Mary sees a faint glimmer and makes for it, John on her heels. They crash through the brush and stumble into a small clearing, where an old hunting cabin sits dilapidated but still standing. With the Dogman now crashing through the undergrowth right behind them, will the cabin offer refuge? Or have John and Mary only delayed the inevitable confrontation with the beast? John and Mary scramble up the rotting steps of the cabin, just as the Dogman bursts into the clearing with an ear-splitting howl. They throw their weight against the grimy door and slowly it creaks shut, the rusted hinges screaming in protest. For a moment they lean against the wood, gasping for breath. Then shuffling steps approach from outside, stopping just on the other side. John presses his eye to a knothole and glimpses the hulking shape peering through the cracks, as if sensing their presence within. It lets out a low, threatening growl that vibrates through the door. Mary stifles a sob in her hands, but just as quickly the dogman turns and circles the perimeter, sniffing for another way inside its trapped prey. "We need to barricade the door," John whispers. Working frantically, they lodge a rotting beam into place just as the creature begins ramming its massive shoulder against the wood. Each impact sends splinters flying, and the beam shuddering closer to collapse. They scramble around the dusty interior, searching for anything to add to their defense. But will their desperate measures hold off the monster? And if it breaches their shelter, will John and Mary escape to see another dawn? Or will this cabin in the woods become the setting for a grisly showdown with the Dogman? The Dogman's savage blows threaten to splinter the door at any moment. John scans the cabin for anything useful and spots an old cast iron stove. "Help me push this," he hisses to Mary. They strain against the rusted metal frame as the door cracks behind them. With a final groan, the stove shifts and they guide it atop the beam. For a brief moment, silence. Then the assault resumes, even more frenzied than before. The door shudders under the onslaught while John and Mary huddle near the back wall, exhaustion and fear draining what's left of their strength. "We can't stay in here, that thing will get in," Mary cries. John knows she's right but sees no way out. It's then he notices a trapdoor above, barely visible in the shadows. He drags over an old chair and throws it open, revealing a narrow hatch leading upwards. "The attic!" Without hesitation, he hoists Mary through the square opening, just as behind them, an ear-splitting crack splits the air. The door has splintered, the barricade breached at last. As splinters fly and the Dogman's monstrous form fills the entryway, John pulls himself up on trembling arms to face their pursuer one last time. John scrambles up into the dim attic just as gnashing teeth and claws tear through the cabin below. He slams the trapdoor shut, but it won't latch. All that separates them from the monster now is a thin layer of wood. Mary is paralyzed with fear, tears streaming in the faint light filtering between the roof slats. John races to her side, puts a finger to his lips urgently. Below, they hear the Dogman tearing through the cabin, overturning furniture in its rage. Then a sniffing sound at the trap door. John's eyes dart around frantically until landing on an old crossbeam overhead. In one fluid motion, he grabs Mary around the waist, spins her up and pushes with all his might until she's lying flat along the beam. He rolls under just as claws punch through the trap, inches from his face. The creature snarls and snaps, trying to get a purchase. John scrambles backward out of reach until bumping into Mary. They cling to the beam, barely daring to breathe as the Dogman's frustrated howls echo in the small space. Have they found a momentary refuge, or will the beast finally claim them in these claustrophobic heights? Their story reaches its perilous peak. Up in the cramped attic, John and Mary cling trembling to the crossbeam, listening with dread as the Dogman's snarls echo below. Suddenly it stops. An eerie silence falls over the cabin, more unsettling than the beast's fury. After what feels like an eternity, John slowly rolls onto his side, gesturing for Mary to stay put. Inch by inch, he crawls to the edge and peers through a knothole. At first, he sees only the ruined remains of their former shelter. Then a flicker of movement. The Dogman is nosing around the trapdoor, as if somehow sensing their presence overhead. It rears back and lets out an almighty howl that shakes dust from the rafters. John scrambles back to Mary in panic, putting a finger to his lips. They hear the cabin door splinter farther inward, then receding footsteps into the night. But for how long will the monster be gone? And even if it leaves, how will John and Mary escape this claustrophobic prison? The flickering light of dawn provides no answers, only deepening shadows. Another chapter awaits in the grip of this woodsman nightmare. The long night drags on with no sign of the beast's return, but no hope of rescue emerges either. As the pale light of dawn creeps through cracks in the roof, John crawls back to the trapdoor and listens intently. Only silence greets him from below. He turns to Mary with a determined look. "I'm going down to search for anything useful. Stay here and keep quiet as a mouse, you hear?" She nods fearfully. With a deep breath, John pushes up the trapdoor and drops lightly to the cabin floor, tense as a coil. All lies in ruin from the Dogman's rage. But amid the wreckage, John spies a glint of steel, an old hatchet left embedded in a beam. He wrenches it free just as a noise makes him spin, weapon raised. But it's only Mary who has followed silently behind. "I'm not letting you out of my sight," she insists. Together they pick through the debris. That's when John spots something shoved under the rubble, a tattered map, markings scribbled in faded ink. Could it be a way out of these woods? They scan it desperately as footsteps crunch outside, coming closer.